Hi folks, today we're going to look at a quick introduction to absolute value functions. We talked about absolute value equations and how to solve them, and you know there's two cases, and when we take the absolute value of something it becomes positive. We're understanding of that. I want to talk about something like when we have a function, a y equals, or an f of x equals the absolute value of x. If I were to make a table of values to represent this function, let's say I go from -3 to 3. I know that when I take the absolute value of -3, I get 3. The absolute value of -2 is 2. The absolute value of -1 is 1. Absolute value of 0 is 0. The absolute value of 1 is not -1. Remember, it's 1. Absolute value of 2 is 2. Absolute value of 3 is 3, and so on. So we know that. We know numerically what that looks like. Let's take a look at what the graph of that absolute value function looks like. If I were to take those values from the previous screen and plot them on the coordinate plane, let's see what this looks like. We said the absolute value of -3 is 3. The absolute value of -2 is 2. The absolute value of -1 is 1. This almost looks like a linear function, right? It continues in at that same rate of change. The difference is once we hit anything positive, our graph is going to turn around and do the opposite thing. The absolute value of 1 is 1, and we can kind of see we took a change here. We are going in a different direction. The absolute value of 2 is 2, absolute value of 3 is 3, and so on. Any single time we have an absolute value function, we're going to get this V shape. That's just the rules for absolute value. It's almost like we have the line y equals x on one side. That's this piece with a positive slope, and y equals -x on the other side. Same slope, except now the slope is negative. Every single absolute value works that same way. This absolute value function, the basic absolute value function, is called the parent function. It's the most simple absolute value function that we have. We call it the parent function. We do this with all kinds of functions. It's like we had a 1 in front times the absolute value of x plus nothing plus nothing. So there's nothing going on here. We're multiplying by 1, we're adding 0, we're adding 0. When we change those numbers from zeros and ones, the absolute value function shifts a little bit, but it's still always, always, always going to be a V shape. So let's explore a little bit with Desmos and see what happens as we change those numbers in the function. Try the next few screens.